This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Yes, this is your host, Harry Wilkinson, and welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. This is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks events, happenings in the world of politics, international news, the environment, technology, entertainment, and we take a look at it from a higher perspective. We take a look at it from a spiritual perspective, if you will, not religious. And, of course, this is something I always reiterate as many times as I can, because this isn't a religious show, but we do talk about religion, as we will be today, because we're going to be talking about the Pope and his visit. But what we talk about usually expands beyond the confines of traditional religion, and we talk about a spiritual nature that we have, an understanding or a connection, a sense of oneness, and an ability to look at what we are creating in the outer world, for lack of a better word, or the material world, or the world of illusions, which is what they are, and how we play in this environment, and through that process reconnect with the truth of who we really are, which is expansion, which is oneness, which is divine mind, again, for lack of a better term. So there's a metaphysical element to my approach to these things. Basically, it's almost, I look at it as a wellness technique, which is why I call it the Spirit and Wellness Show. It's a wellness technique because we are bombarded with lots of information, particularly news information that comes at us from varying sources. And this is only stepped up in the age of the internet and 24-hour news cycles and so forth and so on. And many people find this bombardment of information to be difficult and button pushing, because the gatekeepers who sort of channel this information, and by gatekeepers I mean gatekeepers are the media, newspapers, networks like CNN or Fox or MSNBC, anybody who chooses stories and creates stories that are then disseminated to the public. Those are the gatekeepers, and quite often these gatekeepers, in a desire to get the quickest and most amount of readers, listeners, or audience, will use stories that are button pushing, that get your attention. So what we do is we take a step back, we go beyond that button pushing. And that's, I understand that's easier said than done, but that's the process. We begin to look at these stories as not good or bad, or we don't judge them in the way that we're expected to judge them, but we use them in a different way. We use them to look at the creation that we've made and see what it has to say to us, see where it brings us. When we go into it, we take energy from it because it took the energy that we gave it to create it. If we go in and we take the energy back, we begin to reconnect with, as I say, the truth of who we are, divine mind. So that's the process. But in the meantime, we talk about these issues and see what they have to say to us. And this is a very, very important, I think, and busy week. So we're going to be talking about the Pope and his visit, because that happened. And we're going to talk about the effects that it had on certain people, particularly certain people in the government. And we're also going to talk about the global goals that were put into place this week. And we're going to see how those two stories actually connect, because they do quite a bit. And we'll also take a look at, in our wellness portion, we'll take a look at some healthy vegetables we can be eating to protect our immune system as we move into, fall months. And this is particularly a time when allergies are quite a problem for some people. So hopefully we'll get into we'll get into that if we have enough time. But as I say, we've had a lot to talk about in this week. So I think we'll get right to it, and we'll start with the Pope, who is only the fourth Pope to ever visit the United States of America, and the first Pope to ever address a body of Congress here in the United States. And as you can imagine, and as you probably heard, it was quite controversial for some, because Pope Francis is not a shy person in stating what he believes, and what he sees as a problem for the world, for the country, and for the spiritual health of people. As I said before, on this show, this is a Pope who, as I've drawn lines to delineate what religion is, as opposed to what spirituality is, this is a Pope that breaks through or crosses over the line of what religion is, specifically his organized religion, and goes into the broader realm of spirituality. So that he's a Pope that, people of all faiths can get something from, because he is being spiritual as well as being religious. He's coming from a spiritual place as well as, the place of dogma that his religion requires him to adhere to. So he's a hugely popular Pope, by the way. He was doing the rock star thing here in the United States. He came to Washington, D.C., and he spoke to Congress. He spoke to his own congressional, Catholics here, the Basilica in Washington, D.C. And he spoke with the president, of course. And then he went to New York to speak to the UN. And we'll get to that in a minute, because that ties into the UN's global goals, which we're also going to talk about today. And, he made many, many important statements that, we'll get to a few of them here. But, one of the things that he said, which garnered some disapproval from particularly those who are not very supportive of immigration in this country. He introduced himself at the White House by saying that he is the son of an immigrant family and happy to be a guest in this country, which was largely built by such families. So a little dig there at people like Donald Trump, who are, proposing mass deportation of immigrants in this country, and revocation of citizenships for people who are born here from immigrants. But he was determined and did make very, very maximum use of his time in the spotlight. He spoke to Congress about a number of things that were on his agenda that he felt needed to be said. He decried the partisanship that has become almost insurmountable in certain cases in our government. And of course, climate change is one of his big issues. So, he had quite a lot to say. And I'm going to just give you some of the highlights here in just a second. He mentioned 4 Americans that he felt were very important to who and what we are. And as he said, these men and women offer us a way of seeing and interpreting reality. A people with this spirit, they shaped fundamental values which will endure forever in the spirit of the American people. A people with this spirit can live through many crises, tensions, and conflicts while always finding the resources to move forward and to do so with dignity. These men and women offered us a way of seeing and interpreting reality, and in honoring their memory, we are inspired, even amid conflicts, and in the here and now of each day, to draw upon our deepest cultural reserves. So he mentioned 4 Americans: Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, Dorothy Day, which you may or may not know, I did not know until I researched, and Thomas Merton. Also, one name that might not be commonly known. But of course, President Lincoln, who, as the Pope said, was a guardian of liberty and labored tirelessly that this nation under God might have a new birth of freedom. Dorothy Day, and of course Martin Luther King and his, work on civil rights. Again, this is about freeing the human spirit, and those 2 gentlemen certainly used their inspiration to do so. Now, Dorothy Day is someone who is a Catholic, and hold on, I will get that information for you. She was a social activist. She passed away in 1980, and she was very, very active in the Catholic Church. She established the Catholic Worker Movement, a movement that continues to this day to help with direct aid for the poor and homeless, and with nonviolent action on their behalf. She's being considered for canonization, and she has the title from the church as Servant of God. She was controversial in that she, at a time in our history, when there was very strong feelings about communists, she had a certain sympathy for them based on the idea that of workers' rights. That's what she was basing it on. She said, to labor is to pray. That is the central point of the Christian doctrine of work. Hence, it is that while both communism and Christianity are moved by compassion for the multitude, the object of communism is to make the poor richer, but the object of Christianity is to make the rich poor and the poor holy. Very interesting. She also said, we believe in widespread private property, the deproletarializing of our American people. We believe in the individual owning the means of production, the land and his tools. We are opposed to the finance capitalism so justly criticized and condemned by Karl Marx, but we believe there can be a Christian capitalism as there can be a Christian communism. And that's fascinating. Those words echo today very much in the words of people like Bernie Sanders, who considers himself to be, a proponent of a different kind of capitalism, something that sort of combines socialism with capitalism. So very interesting that he chose her as someone, a representative of American spirit, but understandable because she is a Catholic and worked through the Catholic Church. And then the other person that he mentioned was Thomas Merton. Now, Thomas Merton is also a Catholic, and he actually converted to Catholicism after having a rather wild life of hedonism, and he became a monk and a social activist as well. And he wrote about 50 books, many on different religions such as Zen Buddhism and Taoism. He had dialogues with the Dalai Lama, and he had quite an interesting life. Won't get into a lot of it, but just to say that once he became part of the Catholic Church, he became very, very focused on advocating for social causes. So again, this is someone else that the Pope points to as being people who stood up at a time when social change was needed. Now, why is this important? Well, as I told you before, our show, my show, has changed its focus slightly since a couple of months ago. We've been focusing on what I call the transition era. And it's my contention that we are in this transition era. And if you've been listening to the show before, I mentioned how we went through a transit of 2 planets. In astrological terms, that means the influence of these planets represent social trends. Now, I know many of you don't particularly believe in astrology, but I use it just as sort of a way to illustrate what's been happening. So between the years of 2012 and March of 2015, we had 2 planets, Uranus and Pluto, in sort of opposition to each other over that period of time. And there were times when they would have more of an intense connection and then would move away. But basically, what that symbolized, Uranus symbolizing revolution, freedom, innovation, new ways of doing things, and Pluto representing absolute power, overwhelming force in some cases, and obsession, and so forth. These 2 forces were indicating a period of social upheaval, which we went through. It's the period that brought us things like the Arab Spring and the Ukraine situation, and in this country, brought forward dialogue on very important issues like income inequality and, the police use of force in certain cities and areas of the country against blacks and other ethnic minorities. And these have become huge, huge issues now. They've always been with us, but this period of time is a time when we began to really make strides and make them a focus. And you've seen these things happen quickly. For years, gay marriage has been, something that couldn't get done, and now it's done. There was, over the summer, an issue with the Confederate flag, and after an incident in which a shooter killed 9 black people in a black church, overnight, Confederate flags were taken down from public buildings across this country, and major chains like Target and Walmart refused to sell the flag. These are the kinds of things that are happening now, and that's why I call this the transition era. And this pope is the perfect pope for the transition era, because he is, and in bringing up those 4 people, he was talking about 4 people who stepped up at a time, at different times when there was a transition going on. So I feel like he senses this transition era that we're in. And so his speech to Congress resulted in a lot of things. There was a lot of backlash from conservatives about him, what he was saying. He urged that he urged or called for healing of the rift and the sort of divide that has happened, between Republicans and Democrats, and urged them to find ways to move forward on these issues, such as climate change and so forth. And, he talked about how much progress has been made with social justice. And he said how much has been done in these first years of the third millennium to raise people out of extreme poverty. I know you share my conviction that much more still needs to be done, and in times of crisis and economic hardship, a spirit of global solidarity must not be lost. At the same time, I would encourage you to keep in mind all those people around us who are trapped in a cycle of poverty. They too need to be given hope. The fight against poverty and hunger must be fought constantly and on many fronts, especially in its causes. I know that many Americans today, as in the past, are working to deal with this problem. He also said, I call for a courageous and responsible effort to redirect our steps and to avert the most serious effects of the environmental deterioration caused by human activity. I'm convinced that we can make a difference, and I have no doubt that the United States and this Congress have an important role to play. Now is the time for courageous actions and strategies aimed at implementing a culture of care and an integrated approach to combating poverty, restoring dignity to the excluded, and at the same time protecting nature. We have the freedom needed to limit and direct technology, to devise intelligent ways of developing and limiting our power, and to put technology at the service of another type of progress, one which is healthier, more human, more social, and more integral. In this regard, I am confident that America's outstanding academic and research institutions can make a vital contribution in the years ahead. So, I mean, there were many, many things that he talked about. And, speaking from really a spiritual perspective, although he was bringing up some political ideas. So very, very interesting, and that leads to what's going on at the UN today, which is the adoption of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, on this program before, we talked about the Millennium Goals that had just expired, and the progress that had been made in some areas, but not all areas, in those 15 goals that had been developed. But now this one, and they were reported in what we call the Millennium Development Report. Well, now that that time has expired, it's time for new goals. So 17 Sustainable Development Goals were adopted. And I'll tell you just what some of them were. End poverty in all its forms everywhere. End hunger, achieve food security and improved nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. Ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. And sustainable management of water and sanitation. That's going to be a huge issue coming up, in the next 15 years. It already is. There was a report out that our infrastructure, as far as water, cleanliness, and transportation, is beginning to crumble. What else we have here? Promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth. Full and productive employment and decent work for all. Reduce inequality within and among countries. Conserve and sustainably use ocean, seas, and marine resources. And take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Protect, restore, promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems. Manage forests. Combat desertification. And halt and reverse land degradation and biodiversity loss. And promote peaceful and inclusive societies. And strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. So those are just some of them. And as you can see, they're very broad and somewhat difficult to measure, as far as how much progress can and will be made in the future. But what it is it's a guideline. It's a promise. It's more of an inspiration to focus us on the transitions that we are going to be making in the transition era. Will they all be met? Well, I think we can make progress on a good deal of them. Probably not all of them will be met in the 15 years that we have, but the fact that we're focused on them will certainly bring more progress to those areas than if we were not. So the global citizen movement was having a very, very big celebration, with rock musicians and crowd meeting in I believe it was Central Park. So this idea that, we have goals, global goals to accomplish, is something that, people are, in large crowds very much in favor of. So the Pope also went on that day to the United Nations to talk about it. It was a great way to kick off that whole idea. And certainly, again, another sign of and indication that we are in the transition era. And as pessimistic as some can be, I am pretty optimistic that once we focus on these areas, we are going to have a new frame of mind, a new way of looking at the world, and a new way of treating each other. So, until next week, God bless.